Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into something really mind-bending, a topic that pushes at our ideas of consciousness, reality, even our own biology. We've got a stack of material here, mostly from Dr. Rick Strassman's book, DMT, the Spirit Molecule. It's all about his, well, pretty groundbreaking human research with DMT, N-Dimethyltryptamine. Our mission today, to really unpack this whole journey, from its ancient roots, why it's even in our bodies, to what people actually experience in these clinical trials and the questions it raises about spirit, reality itself. You're definitely in for some surprises, maybe a few aha moments along the way.
Yeah, it's fascinating because this deep dive lets us look right at that intersection, doesn't it? Science, spirituality, human experience. It often pushes the boundaries of what we normally think of as real. We'll try to connect these different pieces, the science, the stories, the philosophy, and really get you thinking about consciousness itself.
Okay, so let's set the scene a bit. We need to look at the history that sort of led up to Strassman's work. Before DMT was really on the map, there was mescaline, isolated way back in the 1890s from peyote cactus. Early explorers wrote about, these mind-altering snuffs and brews used by indigenous groups, and people who tried mescaline talked about these artificial paradises. But interestingly, psychiatry at the time, dominated by Freudian ideas, pretty much ignored it. Strassman points out they kind of distrusted anything spiritual, saw it as like a defense mechanism against childish fears. So the whole intellectual climate wasn't really open to it.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Why wasn't there more scientific curiosity? Especially when these things hinted at such huge shifts in perception. It just highlights how important the societal context or setting is even before you get to the substance itself.
Totally. And then this sort gets really interesting. The discovery of LSD, purely by accident. Albert Hofmann, Swiss chemist, 1938, working with ergot fungus. He makes LSD-25, tests it on animal uteruses, finds nothing interesting, and just shelves it for 5 years. Then he gets this, quote, curious presentiment, goes back to it, and accidentally absorbs some.
Right.
And discovers its incredible power. We're talking doses 1,000 times stronger than mescaline.
And connecting that to the bigger picture, LSD showing up around the same time as drugs like Thorazine, the early antipsychotics, that actually helped kickstart what we call biological psychiatry. Serotonin was the key link. Researchers figured out in the mid-50s that LSD structure is incredibly similar to serotonin. It competes for the same spots in the brain. Suddenly, scientists had this amazing chemical tool to probe how the brain and mind relate.
And they really ran with it for a while. Early research, lots of funding actually, government and private. It showed remarkable success in therapy for PTSD, alcoholism, depression. It even helped terminally ill patients find acceptance, apparently reduced their need for pain meds quite dramatically. And some therapists thought the key was this transformative mystical or spiritual experience that the drugs could trigger. That was the therapeutic engine, so to speak.
Yeah, it wasn't just about fixing symptoms, was it? It was about this deeper existential shift, very different from other approaches.
Okay, so that brings us to our star today, DMT. Chemically, it's super simple. Found everywhere, plants, animals, and yes, all of our bodies.
Yeah.
It's called the simplest psychedelic. But what's unique is how fast it hits and how short it lasts. Volunteers felt it within heartbeats, peaks in a minute or two, and then gone in 20, 30 minutes.
Right.
They even called it the businessman's trip, like you could theoretically do it on a lunch break.
And what's really critical here is that DMT is endogenous. Our bodies make it. Researchers found it back in the 60s and 70s in human blood, brain tissue, spinal fluid, which immediately raises the huge question Strassman chased. Okay, what is it doing in our bodies? Why is it there?
And here's another kicker. The brain seems to actively want it. It hungers for it, as Strassman puts it. The brain's got this super protective shield, the blood-brain barrier. Hardly anything gets through easily. But Japanese scientists found the brain uses up precious energy to actively pull DMT across that barrier.
Which is unlike any other psychedelic.
Exactly. But then, despite this, early theories tried to link naturally occurring DMT to mental illness, like psychosis or schizophrenia. And that idea, that fear, really contributed to shutting down all human psychedelic research around 1970. Political concerns took over.
It's a major contradiction, isn't it? The brain goes out of its way to grab this stuff, but research gets stopped because of this shaky link to psychosis. The data on DMT levels in psychotic patients versus others was, well, complex and uncertain.
Yeah.
And the whole idea that one dose could perfectly mimic something as complex as schizophrenia, it wasn't really reasonable, even back then. It really does seem like, political concerns overwhelm scientific principles. Just stop the science cold.
So where did that leave Strassman? He puts forward this bold idea. DMT is the spirit molecule. Not that the molecule itself is spiritual, he's very clear on that, but it's a tool, a vehicle. It reliably triggers states we think of as spiritual. Extraordinary joy, timelessness, a certainty that what we are experiencing is more real than real. Maybe even lets us perceive or interact with normally invisible realms. It's a powerful claim, spirit molecule. But how do you bridge that gap? Subjective experience and hard biology. That's still debated?
Oh, absolutely. Strassman's work was pioneering, no doubt. But interpreting these kinds of experiences through a purely biological lens, that's still a really complex area. Lots of debate in science and philosophy. He's suggesting a mechanism for these spiritual-like states, but he's careful, like you said. It enables it, it doesn't be it. That's a really key distinction he makes.
Okay, so this naturally leads to the pineal gland, that tiny little thing in the middle of the brain, historically called the seat of the soul. Strassman suggests this could be the main factory for our internal DMT, especially at really extraordinary times in our lives. He thinks pineal DMT production might be the physical representation of non-material or energetic processes.
And what makes this plausible, scientifically, is that the pineal gland actually has everything it needs to make DMT. It has the highest levels of serotonin in the body, which is the crucial starting material. It also has the enzymes to convert serotonin into tryptamine, a key step in making DMT. Plus, it might even make these other compounds, beta-carbolines, which stop DMT from breaking down so fast. Kind of like how they work in ayahuasca, the Amazonian brew, letting the DMT become orally active. The pineal might have its own built-in enhancer.
And here's something that really makes you pause, especially for you listening. Strassman weaves this really wide-ranging vision, connecting pineal DMT to these huge life moments. He speculates, could there be a flood of DMT when our life force enters our fetal body, at birth, during deep meditation, psychosis, near-death experiences, and even as we die? And the synchronicity he found is just, well, striking. He discovered that the human pineal gland first appears exactly 49 days after conception.
Wow.
Which is the exact same 49-day interval Tibetan Buddhism talks about for the soul's journey between lives. And it's also when the fetus differentiates into male or female. He found this connection way back in his 20s, called it logically shaky but also intuitively appealing.
And if you think about the bigger picture, the pineal's location makes a lot more sense if it's releasing something fast-acting like DMT. It's right there in the middle, touching visual, auditory, emotional centers. DMT could diffuse quickly. Melatonin, its other product, is slow-acting. This hypothesis also suggests maybe the body fiercely protects the pineal, so we're not constantly tripping out from everyday stress, releasing huge amounts of DMT. Imagine trying to function. It's a kind of evolutionary safety valve, maybe.
Right. So the research in New Mexico, it took 2 years just to get permission and funding. But it finally started in 1990 with healthy volunteers. Let's get into some of what they experienced. And it's a real spectrum, with deep healing, encountering other things, but also real fear sometimes. Okay, so on the personal breakthrough side, there was Stan. He'd used LSD before, found DMT too much too fast initially. But during one part of the study, he was going through a divorce, a custody battle, real stress. He found the high doses actually helped him clarify the stress, started a process of working through it, a cleansing effect, he called it. Then Andrea, dealing with childhood trauma, she had this terrifying, near-death feeling rush. But by sort of giving up resistance, she came out feeling clearer about who she was, what she needed to do with her life, realizing it was finite.
And then you have the encounters with these unseen worlds and beings. Carl, a blacksmith, he saw prankish silvery elves on a highway holding up these placards with incredibly complex geometric patterns. Heard them giggling like high-speed chatter, said they were totally in control. And Dmitri, who had explored altered states before, he found himself in an alien laboratory, saw orderlies checking his instruments, felt this intense sexual circuit activated, but he described it as incredibly unpsychedelic, lucid, sober, like they were preparing me for something, not intoxicated.
Yeah, and near-death type states were pretty common too. Willa described a classic NDE, a tunnel or channel of light, feeling like she almost didn't want to leave it. Carlos, after a really high dose, had a full-blown death rebirth experience. Saw his own lifeless body on the bed, then felt like he became the creator of a whole universe, just marveling at his fingers like a baby. Alina, who practiced Eastern mysticism, felt like she faced the eternal fire of creation and not be burned. Found comfort knowing her soul is eternal. Sean experienced pure being, oneness, ecstasy. Sliding down a ramp as this naked, thin, luminescent, childlike being.
But it wasn't all bliss and oneness. There was definitely fear and difficulty, too. Ida, who was just reading a magazine before her session, found the experience intensely scary, didn't feel safe. just unpleasant, oh, how bad, it would be better to die. She just wanted it over. Lucas, who already had a slow heart rate, his blood pressure dropped dramatically, nearly unrecordable, during a session where he visited some kind of space station landing bay with humanoid automatons. And even Ken, who had this terrifying encounter with sexually violent crocodiles, paradoxically, he came out of it feeling not nearly as afraid to die, which is quite something.
So after all that intensity, what was the lasting impact? Was it worth it for them? Strassman says the long-term benefits are often kind of vague and subtle, really dependent on the person, their set and setting. Some felt, stronger sense of self, less fear of death, more appreciation for life, or a stronger sense of the cosmic or divine. But he also noted that concrete life changes, if they happened, were often kind of already starting before the studies.
And this really highlights a limitation, doesn't it, of these single, isolated sessions in a very clinical research setting. The whole biomedical model focused on data, hospital environment, constant checks, it created tension. Strassman mentions the hospital smells, the interruptions. It could negatively affect the experience. He actually said his own motivation started to fade, partly because he wasn't seeing huge lasting impacts, and also because the frequency of these contact experiences really challenged his whole view of the brain and reality. It became overwhelming.
Right. But despite those difficulties, which led him to stop the research in '95, Strassman is still optimistic about the future. His vision is about enlarging the discussion, getting past the fear, ignorance, and stigma. He imagines ideal research centers, maybe in beautiful natural settings, but with full medical backup. Staff trained not just in medicine, but psychotherapy, psychedelics, even spirituality, a more holistic approach.
And thinking bigger picture, it's about shifting from just, being smart scientifically to being helpful for people. So responsible research into treating tough human problems, PTSD, addiction, the suffering at the end of life. He even floats the idea, imagine giving DMT to someone dying. A sort of dry run for the real thing, potentially giving them a powerful hint of what happens when the body fades, maybe even the feeling of consciousness separate from the body.
And beyond therapy, his vision includes enhancing uniquely human things like creativity, problem solving. You remember that '60s work by Willis Harman using LSD with scientists? Strassman notes Harman found LSD had a powerfully beneficial effect on creativity. Could DMT be a tool like that to boost our imaginative abilities? Lord knows we could use more of that.
We certainly could. And then there's the really far-out question he raises. Can we actually study the transdimensional properties of DMT? If we assume, just for argument's sake, that these encounters with seemingly autonomous entities are possibly real, could research try to map that, look for consistency in these beings, explore alternate realities, parallel universes, even dark matter? It's mind-boggling stuff.
Ultimately, though, Strassman came back to this idea. DMT itself is neutral, value-free. It's neither good nor bad. It's the set and setting, who we are, what we bring to it, that shapes the experience. Who we are and what we bring ultimately mean more than the drug experience itself.
Which leaves us with a really provocative thought for you, the listener, to chew on. If DMT acts like a kind of reality thermostat, keeping us tuned to channel normal most of the time, what does it mean when those levels change, naturally, or if we change them deliberately? What other channels, what other realities might our brains actually be capable of tuning into? And how could understanding this internal spirit molecule truly reshape how we define consciousness and maybe even our place in the whole universe?